This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. It's actually kind of nice out right now. The sun's coming over the horizon. Everything's kind of light outside. It's not gray or dark or overcast. Oh my gosh. I hope it is similar where you are, but if not, I hope otherwise the Sunday is well. So yes, today is the day that I do the Sunday stream. But before I get into today's topic, who's joining me this morning on this beautiful Sunday morning? Noah Asensio, good morning. Kiro Soldier, good morning. Old Guy Gamer, good morning. Brittany Holland, good morning. Somnamnul Nation, good morning. Tall Person, good morning. One Ton Hammer, good morning. Chicago Mike, good morning. A2P, good morning. Robert Pincus, good morning. Your boy Pat, good morning. And a Scanner Daftly, good morning. Also, Grizilla is here. Grizilla, hey, how's it going? Bridget, good morning. Exhumed Legume, good morning. Everybody's popping in now. All right, well, hopefully I've gotten everybody that I see. And if I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good morning. Oh, I'm going to try this. Gilcato? Guillatino? I don't know. You tell me. I want to get it right. So tell me. Ryan R., good morning. All right. So as you may recall, about a week or so ago, I did an ambush stream regarding the scandal that is the Antiracism Research Center at Boston University, headed by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, and how ever since it was created back in 2020 and the tens of millions of dollars that it has received in generous donations and other such funding, it has accomplished nothing. Done nothing. And nobody knows exactly where the money went. The articles that I looked at all talked about ineffective management at the center, but they never really talked about, like, well, where did the money go? And in a couple of those articles, it mentioned how some other schools and institutions of learning had their own anti-racism centers or projects. And so I kept my eyes open over the last week or so to see if I could find something on one of those other projects. And lo and behold, what has occurred within the last week? Well, a conference, seemingly a Zoom conference, a series of videos and discussions and panels at the, and let me make sure I get this right because I'm still not quite sure that I believe this is a thing that exists, as I put in the thumbnail. The Institutional Anti-Racism and Accountability Project. Now, usually when I hear about something that is institutional these days, it's usually a pejorative, like institutional racism or institutional sexism. But in this case, we have a project around, I guess, encouraging institutional anti-racism, which boggles my mind. This project is run out of the Ash Center at the Kennedy School of Harvard University. So we have several layers to this onion. And so we have Boston University with its anti-racism center, and we have Harvard University with its anti-racism center. So I was curious, how exactly do you hold some institution accountable for instilling anti-racism into its policies, procedures, and otherwise? And I was also curious, since this conference apparently took place just within the last week or two, whether or not they would bring up the controversy taking place over at Boston University related to anti-racism. So a whole bunch of things going on here. But that's the focus of this episode. Before I proceed, thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk, for the happy, smiley, dancy Dog Cat Fox. Oh, Dog Cat Fox.
Wowie, wow, wow.
That's a Weebo Jones Dog Cat Fox. So thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk. Also, a couple more hellos here. Bearded Devil 1864. Good morning. Gilcado says second version was correct. I'm assuming what I just said was the correct second version. I don't remember which one I said first. Guile Cado? Okay. I think of Guile from like Street Fighter, or Street Fighter 2, more appropriately. Ebony Williams, good morning. Who else is here? Of course, Mr. Tickletrunk. Lil Mo Sislak, good morning. And I think that's everybody. Okay. What else I was going to say? Oh, so this video, link to the original is in the description. I did do a little bit of editing because with some of these panel discussions from past experience, I know that they spend a good portion of the first few minutes talking about the association's upcoming events and a whole bunch of other things. So I did remove that plus, and I know you're going to be disappointed, I did remove a relatively lengthy land acknowledgement. Yes, I did take out the 2 or 3 minute long self-flagellating we are on stolen land thing because it had nothing to do with anything and didn't get to the heart of the presentation. So if you would like to see the presentation in its entirety, link is in the description. But with all of that being said, let's get to it. Now, this entire thing lasts just about an hour and 15 minutes, a little less. I'm only going to go for an hour and a half in real time, unless there is some compelling reason to go forward, or if there's some reason to do a part 2 down the line. So, with all of that being said, let's begin.
Welcome, everyone, to this year's convening, Truth and Transformation 2023, Tools for Accountability, Lessons and Strategies for Racial Equity.
Oh, boy. And there's subtitles that I didn't know were there. Great. Lessons for Accountability and Transformation. I love accountability and transformation. I'm sure I could make some kind of Transformers joke there, but I didn't.
This is our 5th year hosting the conference.
Oh.
I'm extremely excited about this year's timely and important panels, keynotes, and we have an amazing art intervention.
Art intervention? I'm imagining like a camera crew following around an artist for like a week, telling them that they're doing a documentary on independent artists or something. And then at the very last episode, they bring the artist into a room full of their peers to give them an intervention. It's like, well, we need to tell you the value on your oil painting is insufficient. Oh no, but we have help. We just want to help you. So we're sending you off to an art school.
Now I want to turn things over to Professor Arkan Fong, the director of the Ash Center and the Winthrop Laughlin McCormick Professor of Citizenship and Self-Government, for a few words of introduction.
Oh,
hey,
boy.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Truth and Transformation Conference. The Ash Center is the hub of the Kennedy School. And
Okay, that guy's got a really awesome name, Arkan Fung. That sounds like a character out of StarCraft or something. Arkan. Wow, all right.
Harvard for work that develops ideas and practices to create a more equal and inclusive, multiracial and multi-ethnic democracy all around the world.
Wow, those are goals.
The Institutional Anti-Racism and Accountability Project is a jewel of the Ash Center, and this annual Truth and Transformation Conference that you all have joined is one of our most important efforts of the year.
Take of it, even though if I'm doing so quite late, 5 years into the project and only on the periphery.
Directing the IRA project is, of course, my treasured colleague, Khalil Gibran Muhammad. Professor Muhammad is the Ford Foundation Professor of History, Race, and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School.
Nothing I like more than focusing on race in education.
And he is the former director of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, which is a division of the New York Public Library and the world's leading library and archive of global Black history. Without further ado, let me turn things over now to Khalil.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Arkan. And indeed, welcome to the Truth and Transformation Conference of 2023.
I feel so welcomed. And for those of you who might not be familiar with this format, I have to pause, even if I don't have anything particularly interesting to say, every once in a while, because this is a transformative work of fair use, commentary, and criticism. That has been your PSA for this episode.
I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. As is often said, you could have chosen to be elsewhere this morning, but you chose to be here.
You know, Some part of me thinks that nearly every time I do a video on one of these things or a TEDx, it's true. I could have been anywhere else, but for some reason, I chose to be here. And such sympathies also extend to my audience.
Today's half-day conference is day 1 of 2, the second of which will be next Wednesday, October 3rd.
Oh.
Please be sure to join us then.
Oh, so I could make a series out of this. Oh, boy.
This is our 5th annual Truth and Transformation Conference. I want to thank our incredible team, Allison, Erica, Angel, Gloria, Carrie, Carla, Jahida, Miriam, and of course,
Annette, Cubby, Timmy. Oh, sorry, I'm going for Mickey Mouse Club. I will say, granted that this isn't somehow overproduced, so far this has been as far as audio is concerned, the clearest Zoom call I have ever encountered on this channel or otherwise. Everybody's got, I mean, Harvard spares no expense in getting everybody the cameras and the microphones they need for a clear broadcast. So kudos on them.
The many wonderful people here at the Ash Center, Melissa, Sarah, Gina, Daniel, and our executive director, Tim, for all that you've done to support us.
Sure.
I also want to thank the Open Society.
Okay, if I'd known all these acknowledgments and thank yous were here, I would have cut this out too, but oh well.
Foundation for continuing to support this annual event.
Okay.
And yes, I should emphasize, this conference is as important as it was when it began in 2019.
If you say so.
Before the backlash to the 1619 Project.
Oh, the 1619 Project. That was brought up not too long ago. Yes. Tell us all about the value of the 1619 Project. Let's talk about the accountability of the 1619 Project in relation to actual historians. You want to bring up that? I mean, it is a few years old now, but it's just as important now as it was then, right?
Before the killing of George Floyd.
Yeah, although, boy, oh boy, more money's been made on the back of that man's life. Holy cow. I was thinking the other day, you know, if not for George Floyd, can you imagine? His death has been leveraged into so much money, one way or the other, in the last 3 years. It's actually remarkable.
Before the national reckoning and before the legislative assault on the freedom to learn, teach, read, and speak the truth of American history.
Oh, well, this goes back to the other TEDx I did a couple of weeks ago where we're talking about banned books and how you're being restricted from teaching children to hate themselves or hate each other because of things they had nothing to do with and primarily based on their skin color. Yeah, it's a terrible time to be alive.
We started in 2019 with a simple proposition that the work of racial equity is not out there, somebody else's problem, some politician's issue to solve, or some other organization, but that the problem is at home, within the walls of our and often your own organization. So we focused on the Harvard Kennedy School and its poor record of progress over many decades.
Its poor record of progress in what way?
We brought back alumni to tell the stories of their attempts 40 years ago to diversify and make more equitable this school.
So the Harvard Kennedy School, up until 2019 at least, was a functionally racist institution? Is that? I mean, I know nothing about the Harvard Kennedy School. I'm not exactly an Ivy League individual, if you haven't noticed. So is that the story then?
And we showcase leaders in other institutions that had done effective truth telling and transformation at their institutions, including the former president of Brown and Smith Universities, Ruth Simmons.
She was the president of 2 different colleges?
You can watch this and all our past conferences at our website or read highlights of the proceedings.
Okay.
The next year, in 2020, we considered the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, nobody should have to make the business case because it's just the right thing to do. There shouldn't be a business case. There shouldn't be a profit motive to doing the right and moral thing. At least that's what I've been told over and over and over again, usually in presentations telling me about the business case, because obviously setting aside the profit motive which is the element used to convince people to take part in the whole DEI situation. As we know, more diverse teams lead to more innovation and lead to more profit, as we know.
In the private sector, and heard from leading practitioners who highlighted successes, challenges, and failures, largely in the unwillingness to create performance measures to track change.
Okay, these are all very high-minded terms. I don't know what they mean. I can guess, but...
Overwhelmingly, our experts noted that without data and accountability, change was not possible.
I'm always, and this is the thing, I've asked this before, accountability as a concept has been brought up time and time again in panel discussions and videos that I've looked at regarding organizations and their DEI programs in specific, and I guess in this case, anti-racism in general, which, you know, DEI and anti-racism are kissing cousins if nothing else. I've always wondered, like, what exactly is accountability for it, right? What is the Damocles sword that hangs over the head of anybody in charge of an organization and put in charge of meeting these goals, whatever they are? If they don't meet the goals, how do you hold this person accountable for not being actively discriminatory in their hiring and promotion practices? That's always been my question. Like, do you fire this person? It's like, you didn't hire enough people who look like this, therefore, what, you get demoted, you lose your job? Yeah, what does accountability look like? Or is it just shaming? That's the conclusion I always end up coming to, is that accountability in this context just means shaming someone or shaming an organization because their statistics don't match up with the ideal. Their quotas have not been met in the types of demographics they're supposed to fit. But I don't know, because it's never been very explicitly described. Are we talking about some kind of penalty that befalls someone, or are we just talking about cancel culture?
Our third conference reflected on a year of promises, taking stock of how well corporations and nonprofits were in keeping to their racial equity commitments.
You mean their racial quotas?
Millions, or I should say, their multi-billion-dollar investments, or the dismantling of systemic racism that they
where did all that money go, by the way?
Promised after millions of people took to the streets demanding racial justice. Change, of course, is mostly slow and incremental.
It depends on what you mean by change. A lot of things have changed since 2020 because of all of this.
But we learned from many people on corporate and nonprofit boards and others at the leadership table how performative many of these commitments were.
Performative. So if some company, some organization or whatever drops $5 million into a particular program or institution or something, that's performative. Okay, well, let's say it's a gesture, an insincere gesture. You're still being handed tens of millions of dollars, depending on the organization and so on. So even if it's performative, even if somebody's just doing it for the sake of PR, you're the one with the responsibility to take that support and turn it into something real. So, I mean, you can bite the hand that feeds you after the fact and say you're not being a true ally, but they still handed you cash on the barrel. So doesn't that responsibility then befall on you to make something out of it? And if nothing happens as a result, whose fault is it again?
Last year, we turned our attention to the value of truth-telling, both here in the United States and internationally.
The value of truth-telling. You know, I kind of learned that lesson around the age of, I'd say 3 or 4, about the importance of telling the truth. But I admit there are plenty of people on this planet that still need to learn that lesson, even up to and including grown adults. So, okay.
Recognizing that too many organizations skipped over reckoning with their own exclusionary practices in the past to simply focus on the future.
Okay. What would you, I don't know, I'm asking rhetorically, of course, for any particular hypothetical organization that has a past, quote unquote, what kind of reckoning would you recommend they undertake to make you feel good about them? Just curious. I'm assuming it has something to do with money.
But this is like hastily treating someone who complains of back pain with ibuprofen when what they really need is a CT scan to discover that they have kidney stones or something much worse.
Are you the CT scan in this analogy?
We learned that there is no pathway to healing, to transformation, to justice that does not begin with a proper diagnosis of the problem and an unflinching commitment to truth.
And are you the accredited expert that can diagnose an organization's equity issues then and discover the truth behind someone's invisible evils? I guess what I'm asking is, are you the witch finder general of this scenario?
Today, we focus on tools for accountability, lessons, and strategies for racial equity.
Okay.
What can we learn from people at all levels, from the C-suite to the community, who have successfully pushed for accountability from within the institutions where they work?
I again, not to be too repetitive here, but I really do hope that, unlike I think just about every other presentation I've ever looked at that's brought up the subject, I really do hope that they specify what accountability actually looks like and not just have it floating out there as a concept, but tell us, okay, if company X doesn't do this, then this is the result and should be the consequence, like specifically.
We will start with our opening panel on roadmaps and what is required for charting the course for effective racial equity work. Okay. Following, we will convene a discussion of the impact of reporting and regulating for change. This will culminate with a keynote by Christine Cordero of Asian Pacific Environmental Network, who will draw out the critical strategies her work has imbued to organize at the crux of racial and environmental justice, particularly with AAPI communities and immigrants.
I have a feeling, and I think I might have seen it, that this video series has several parts to it over the course of this conference. So I don't know what we'll get in this part, and I'll be curious to see if I'm curious enough at the end of it to do any further parts into it.
Today's conference also comes at the most urgent time in most of our lives.
Oh.
No matter what side of the equality versus equity divide or censorship versus truth-telling line you stand on.
Whoa. Wait a second. Equality versus equity is censorship versus truth-telling. Wait. Okay, so equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome is the same as censorship versus quote-unquote truth-telling. All right. Are you sure the truth-telling isn't your particular ideological perspective evangelizing? I mean, if we're going to play semantic games here, I'm happy to join in. But really? Equal opportunity versus equality of outcome, censorship versus truth. Okay, well, one of us is drawing the lines, I suppose. All right.
The future of this society and much of the world is at stake with the choices legislative, political, judicial, and private sector leaders are making right now.
Do you want to talk about the public sector leader Ibram X. Kendi in your neighboring Boston University Antiracism Research Center and the decisions and choices he made over the last 3 years? In your own realm, do you have any commentary on that, I wonder? And I don't know if this conference occurred after those revelations came to light in the press. So I'll be curious to see if they bring up the Boston University Center at all in this, and if they do, what they say.
It is not an exaggeration to say that it is increasingly the case that many of you, if you work in the DEI space especially, may lose your job in the not too distant future.
Why is that? What forces of the universe have conspired to make that so, do you think? I'll be curious to hear their opinion if they talk about it.
Your shop might be criminalized by law or dismantled by corporate policy.
Criminalized by law. Yeah, let's talk about the law, shall we? Let's talk about established law prior to all of this nonsense, as in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically Title VII, but by extension to the education arena, Title VI. May be criminalized by law. Well, the consulting firms, the outside advisors, are probably in a safer position because ultimately all they're doing is advising. What happens is the people and the institutions that are embedded in other organizations, like a DEI program or a DEI executive in a company, that's when, as the employer, they end up in much more iffy waters, let's say, when it comes to legal liability.
Let me remind you that from 2021 to 22, in every state except Delaware, government officials introduced at least one anti-woke or critical race theory measure, including bills, resolutions, executive directives, legislation, regulations, and statements.
Can you explain what their reasoning was for that? I mean, in an objective way. And are you going to at least entertain their arguments or concerns? And if so, then, of course, batten them down with better arguments.
And in June 2023, the Supreme Court struck down the strongest piece of federal policy linked to better equity in higher education, race-based affirmative action.
That's you see affirmative action as the strongest piece of equity. Okay. That right there tells me quite a bit. So valuing people's opportunities first and foremost and primarily on the basis of their skin color is a good thing. Got it.
Even before the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the falsely named plaintiff, Students for Fair Admissions.
Falsely named plaintiff? Okay.
Corporate DEI programs were facing increased scrutiny.
Why? Why were they facing increased scrutiny?
Florida and Texas have already banned DEI work in the public sector, as did the Trump administration in all federal agencies a few years ago.
Why? What is their argument? What is the basis for their opposition? Even if you don't agree with it, can you tell us what their argument is without, gussying it up, just plain telling us what their argument is, and then tell us why your perspective is better? Will you, at any point, give us the full story?
The organization, Students for Fair Admissions, among others, have now squarely set their sights on DEI as the next litigation target, with a public warning stating, quote, all DEI programs and all balancing in employment, training, scholarships, and promotions based on race, national origin, or sex are illegal, and by establishing a TIPS hotline.
Title VI, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, pushed forward by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What do those titles say about discrimination in organizations that accept federal funding or public employers? What elements of a person's makeup are illegal to assess them on for the purposes of opportunities or access? You tell me. I mean, you're at the head of this center at Harvard University, pardon me, which last I checked is well known for its law school. So do you think that maybe there's at least a question worth asking there? If you have public employers and public organizations, nonprofits and otherwise, that are divvying up opportunities on the basis of race, national origin, gender, religion, perhaps, do you think that is fair? Do you think that is just? Do you think that falls in line with the spirit of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the principles and promises that this country is supposed to be working towards bit by bit, year over year, in order to form, quote unquote, a more perfect union? Yes or no? Because I'm getting some conflicting messages here.
We know and should know that the 14th Amendment was established to address 250 years of chattel slavery.
And we also know that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was created to address the existing and lingering disparities and inequities in law in this country based on things that say nothing about a person's ability or character. Are you going to bring that part up? Is that going to be part of this conversation?
With a guarantee that race-based discrimination would be visible and evident in anti-discrimination work.
Which was then further enhanced by the Civil Rights Act. I'm going to become a broken record on this, aren't I?
Here we are in a topsy-turvy reality.
Okay. The time that spanned between the 14th Amendment and 1964, do you want to talk about anything that happened? Anything that happened in the course of this country's development in that time period? And afterwards, history stopped at the 14th Amendment. Okay, if you say so.
This fight is real, and we are in it, here to provide knowledge, research, and resources to people on the front lines, like so many of you. Almost 40 suits on the other side of the ledger, some of the good news we share today, have been filed against companies, including Delta Airlines and Wells Fargo, in the last 3 years because of allegedly misleading promises and statements of diversity and equity commitments, according to an analysis by Bloomberg Law.
Okay. Misleading statements such as, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. Okay. What did Delta Airlines say that violated the law? I don't know. And I'm being sincere here. I don't know. I'm not trying to put any kind of, cynical or sardonic spin on. Maybe Delta Airlines did act outside of the law. I don't know. But context?
A common theme that these suits allege is that companies have failed to live up to their aspirations and have failed to implement goals that they allegedly claim fall outside the company's missions on the basis of return to value to shareholders.
What? Okay, so I don't know what any of that means. I could try to use my imagination to fill in the blanks, but I don't know what any of that means. I'll have to look that up separately if they don't tell us specifically. Because my interpretation of that is Delta Airlines said, yay, diversity, and then they didn't establish a quota and therefore couldn't show that they'd actually achieved anything about the, gussied sentiments about diversity that they said that they would achieve. But I don't know. Okay.
You are increasingly hearing critiques of so-called woke capitalism that not only will set back what minimal progress we have seen since the end of the civil rights era, but surely will contribute to global climate change and the inevitable destruction of this planet.
What? Wait. I gotta hear that again. So wait, opposition to woke capitalism is going to destroy the planet. Is that what I just heard?
The company's missions on the basis of return to value to shareholders.
Right. Okay.
You are increasingly hearing critiques of so-called woke capitalism.
Yes, I have heard critiques of so-called woke capitalism for several years now. It's true.
That not only will set back what minimal progress we have seen since the end of the civil rights era.
So, critique of quote unquote woke capitalism, critique alone, criticism is going to do this.
But surely will contribute to global climate change and the inevitable destruction of this planet.
Okay, so the risk that I have, hypothetically speaking, in simply critiquing quote unquote woke capitalism is the destruction of the planet. Now, last I knew, the only killing word is muad'Dib. So if my critique is going to crack the planet open like the Ishimura in Dead Space, I would love to know that. That is an amazing piece of information. Guess what, everybody? you guys better be quiet. Don't ask questions. Don't criticize anybody who has this agenda. You're going to destroy the planet. Jesus.
Just 2 days ago, a federal judge in Atlanta denied a conservative group's request for an injunction to stop a Black woman-owned venture capitalist firm from awards grants exclusively to Black women entrepreneurs.
Right. I think I heard about that case. Yes.
So I say again, people are fighting this battle.
Yes, but I mean, there's two sides to the argument. Is it right to grant someone money from a public institution, perhaps publicly funded or federally funded, on the basis of someone's race? If that same institution decided to grant money to someone simply because of they were white, I wonder what our speaker would say about that. If any organization decided to have a grants program or a scholarships program whose only major criteria in receiving it was the color of their skin, and that color was white, would our speaker have a problem with that? Because this is one of those things where the mechanisms are exactly the same. So if you don't have a problem with the one, you shouldn't have a problem with the other, right?
So today and next week, we have the opportunity yet again to choose to learn the tools we need to achieve accountability, to choose truth and transformation. Right. We can choose to lead and to join those doing this work well.
This work. Ah, yes, the work.
And now, without further ado,
thank goodness,
I'm excited to introduce my colleague.
Excited to induce. I know. Just one of those slip-ups. I've had them myself all the same. It's kind of funny.
Angel Rodriguez, who will be moderating our first panel.
Okay.
Angel is a dedicated research associate at the IRA Project, where he leads the health and STEM focus areas.
Health? STEM. I thought I heard STEM. Like, I was playing a video game the other day that had stems as part of the layout, and so like the STEM focus. Okay.
He and I recently published a pioneering study on anti-racist institutional change in healthcare. This project, conducted with support from the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation, sheds light on effective paths for institutional change that close racial disparities in healthcare.
Disparities. Does a disparity inherently indicate an inequity? I know. I'm always a nitpicker like that.
We invite you to download the report at our website that can be found at ira.hks. Okay. It is my honor to turn things over to Angel, who will moderate our first panel.
Okay. Well, if I'd known ahead of time that all of this was leading up to the actual panel, I might have taken it out. But all the same, it was informative.
Angel, take it away.
Hello. Good morning. Thank you, Khalil, for that great introduction. I want to say welcome everyone, if this is your first TNT or if this is your fifth one.
TNT? It's dynamite.
We're excited to have you join us today.
Okay.
As the racial equity field expands, there is a range of resources to inform the process of anti-racist change.
Okay.
In this session, we'll focus on a common starting point, roadmaps. This panel will feature advocates with years of experience establishing systems for accountability in their own organizations and fields.
Okay. Well, like I say, I'm very curious to know what accountability is supposed to look like. And again, just as an aside, clearest Zoom conference I have ever witnessed.
From launching new initiatives to shifting internal operations, they'll exchange ideas and tactics for building accountability by answering a common theme question. What strategies generate the strongest impact for organizational anti-racist change?
What strategies create the okay. All right. Again, I'm waiting to be educated. I can't wait.
To guide us on this theme today, please allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists. First and foremost, Dr. Aletha Maybank, a physician, is Senior Vice President and Chief Health Equity Officer at the American Medical Association.
The AMA? Oh boy, I've done lots of videos on the AMA, and especially the Journal of the American Medical Association. That part where that guy, as a member of their staff or whatever, did a podcast where he was talking about racial equity or institutionalized racism, and he offered even the barest question or critique about the idea, and he was effectively fired. And then they scrubbed that podcast from existence. Thankfully, I grabbed a copy before it was gone. I still have it, by the way. And the AMA in general. Elsewise, I've done several things. Yeah, the AMA is great when it comes to DEI and equity and all types of interesting things.
Secondly is Chitra Kumar, the Managing Director of Climate and Energy at the Union for Concerned Scientists, with notable experience at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA.
Okay. I don't know that I've ever done anything on the EPA before. Probably just didn't come to mind. But now that I know that critiquing woke capitalism equals the death of the planet, I might have to take a look at the EPA at some point.
Lastly, and of course, Lorenzo Herrera and Lozano, the
Lastly, and of course, okay,
co-executive director of Justice Funders, guiding the transformation of philanthropy towards a justice transition.
Justice Philanthropers. Okay, so I'm assuming then grants and scholarships extended to people on the basis of what they look like. I can only imagine.
So without further ado, let's jump into it with some helpful definitions for our audience today.
Oh boy, definitions. Okay, all right. All right, get myself psyched up here. Definitions. All right, my body is ready.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Again.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, to get us going.
Yes.
This question is for the group.
Wait. What are we going to get to the definitions?
Get us oriented around what accountability means.
Yes.
In the context of racial equity in your organization.
Yes. Oh, thank goodness. All right. I'm honestly happy. I'm not making this up. It is so rare that they actually zero in on the very thing that I was wondering about from the beginning. Okay, so what does accountability look like in the context of your organization? But here is the question. Here is the follow-up question. Now, and we'll see, maybe he's going to keep adding stuff on here to muddy the waters. We'll see. But now that he's posed that question, what are the odds we're going to get a clear and concise answer from the speakers? Because that's always the exception.
And if you can share with us a brief understanding of how that accountability is deployed from your position.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. First off, kudos to Onhill. He asked a very direct, straight question to each of the speakers. How does accountability work in your organization, and how is it deployed from your position? Okay. He didn't put a whole lot of padding to it. He didn't, trail off into other things and leaving it. Okay. Now, let's roll the dice. What are the odds do you think we're going to get a straight answer? I'm hoping so. I'm hoping it's a very simple question because they should know. They're the professionals. They're in charge of these things. What does accountability look like? If someone does not meet one of the goals, aspirational diversity goals or some other thing, what happens to this person? Or what happens to this department or whatever? Okay. Okay, Onhill, tip for moderating things in the future. Just select somebody off the panel to speak first, because leaving it open like that, everybody's going to be polite and wait for someone else to talk. Just start the ball rolling, pick somebody. Pick somebody, Onhill. Pick somebody.
Oh, okay. I think we're on mute here, our panelist.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. But I have encountered technical difficulties like that before, so all right, I'll extend the benefit of the doubt.
Give them 1 second to unmute here. Let me repeat the question for us to get us going.
Okay.
Again, helpful definitions here. What does accountability mean within the context of racial equity in your organization? Perhaps we can start with Dr. Maybank.
There you go. Good job. All right.
Good morning. Just wonderful to be here. Wonderful to be in conversation. I'm excited to learn from my co-panelists as well, and just grateful for the work that Ira has been doing in really highlighting that accountability is critical.
Yeah. Okay. And how does it work in your organization?
To do this work of racial justice. I'm Chief Health Equity Officer, as was mentioned,
Okay.
at the American Medical Association, which has been around now 176 years.
Wow.
It's a physician advocacy organization, and its mission is around the betterment of public health.
Okay.
As well as making sure that they are the physicians, as they say, most powerful ally.
The physician's most powerful ally. Oh, I thought that was the pharmaceutical lobbyists.
And it has a very strong healthcare lobby, but a very well-known history for the most part of, while advocating for healthcare and different aspects of healthcare, but also has a history of racial injustice.
If you say so.
One, just in terms of its lack of advocacy, as an example, during the civil rights era for civil rights and desegregation, even of hospitals, and trying to block Medicare and Medicaid and Medicare, especially, in passing that.
Okay, so you work for a historically racist organization that I assume, because time, laws, and culture has changed, is no longer that way. Great. How do you dole out accountability in your organization?
But also in excluding Black physicians for over 100 years of its history.
Okay. Is every one of these things going to have confession time before we get to actually answering the question posed? Okay, I get it. A lot of institutions in this country used to operate under the culture and the laws of over half a century ago. It's true. But some stuff has happened since then. It's got nothing to do with this moment or this particular question. So, how do you hold your organization accountable when it comes to racial equity?
And so there are a lot of policies that they have also supported that also, perpetuated or put forth racial injustice in structural ways within this country, or had structural impacts. And
promoting institutionalized anti-racism obviously doesn't do that, right?
And so, my role specifically now, 4.5 years in this role, the House of Delegates, so AMA has a representation of all states. So it kind of operates in one level, very democratically per se, it's very much structured kind of like how Congress has representation. Representation has a certain amount of kind of, votes and power and all of that within the organization.
Okay. And what does accountability mean in the AMA, at least as far as your portion of it is concerned? And how do you affect it?
They put forward policies that they will advocate for. And then I'm hired and I'm on the team and the management team, because there are over 200,000 and 250,000 members. There's a management team that kind of operationalizes or executes on the policy that's passed by the House of Delegates within the AMA.
No, okay. Is this leading up to the accountability part? Because as far as I know, he did not ask you for the structure or the functioning of the entire organization. Maybe this is just prelude to it. I'll I'll extend the benefit of the doubt that all these moving pieces happen, and here's where I come in with accountability. Is that where we're going? Because I hope that's where we're going.
A lot of folks don't quite get that, and I try to go through that because accountability is at several levels.
Okay. All right. Past couple minutes forgiven. All right. So what does accountability look like given the stub snapshot of the structure of the organization that you have given us?
And so one of the ways of which this institution holds itself accountable are through the policies that the House of Delegates passes.
Such as?
And so 4.5 years ago, there was a policy that was put forward to create an organizational unit called the Center for Health Equity, and to have this position hired.
The Center for Health Equity. You know, there might be several organizations similarly named like that, but I think I may have done a program on that previously. I think.
In order for AMA to have a more intentional focus on equity work, and that it's not, just a decision by one person, but it actually is rooted in the structure and policy of AMA to have this position.
Okay. And if they don't perform the way that they're supposed to, you hold them accountable by?
And then to bring somebody on board to do this. And I am held accountable to ensure that we had a strategic plan in place. So in terms of a roadmap for racial justice at the AMA, and I'm held accountable by our board of trustees.
How are you held accountable? What is the consequence for you not fulfilling whatever it is, whether it's goals, your role, whatever? What does accountability look like? What is the threat hanging above the heads of the organization and its individual components to fulfill this mission? If they don't, what happens?
And so I have, we have to share annual progress and updates based on the strategic plan that was developed it was 2021, which was released. So the time period is 2021 to 2023 of the strategic plan to.
Okay. And how have you done in achieving the goals of that plan? And whether you have been or not, if you didn't, what happens?
To embed racial justice and advance health equity. It's a document that 80 pages long, a little too long for any strategic plan. I don't think any plan should be that long, but
it is. Does that say something about the plan?
Noting that in healthcare, there were just so many different understandings and not, I don't feel like good, strong understanding of even what the problem was. I think Khalil mentioned it about you have to know the problem and be able to diagnose the problem in order to know where to go.
Yes. I bring that up oftentimes in TEDx talks where someone will state what the problem is, successfully or otherwise, and then the question becomes, well then, if this is the problem you are citing, what do you propose as a solution? Oftentimes that's not effectively answered one way or the other. But okay, so even in the AMA, they didn't know what the problem was. Even after 80 pages of strategy, they didn't know what the problem was they were attempting to address. They were just trying to address the suspicion of a problem. Okay, I'm not that this would be the first time, but I'm getting a lot of mixed messages from the AMA on exactly what they're doing.
And so we really needed to lay out, what is the basics of what is racism, and what does that mean within medicine?
Okay, here's the basics of racism. Elevating and or denigrating someone on the basis of their race. That's, at its simplest, that is it. Yeah, someone or a demographic of someone's based on their race. And you can be a racist to your own race. You could be a sniveling, wretched individual who says that because of my skin color, I am a terrible person. That's the funny thing about racism. Really, anybody can practice it in any direction you can think of, and it's still racism. So the American Medical Association really needed to figure out what were the basics of racism. Well, boy, oh boy, could I get a consulting fee for that one? I think I covered it in about 30 seconds.
Distinctions between the social drivers of health and structural drivers of health. And
health is a human concern, not a racial demographic. Okay.
You have to, in terms of intersectionality and all of that. So you had to kind of define all those pieces within the document.
Did you define intersectionality in the document? Did you define intersectionality? Did you go back to Kimberly Crenshaw to talk about the origins of intersectionality? Do you know what intersectionality is defined as at this point? Can you give me a concise definition of it? Oh, Jesus.
But then the document itself, lays out 5 approaches of how we were going to do our work.
Okay.
One of them in the last approach is fostering pathways for truth and reconciliation and healing at AMA in light of our past.
And what does that look like? What does accountability look like?
And so we've been embarking on doing lots of work around that. We have accountability through external, advisors.
No, I don't know. I don't know. What kind of accountability? An external advisor does what? What power does an external advisor have to hold the organization accountable for whatever you're talking about? What are the consequences for failure? That is what we're talking about here. What are the consequences for failure? If you don't achieve the goals, if you don't fulfill the strategy, what happens to you? Why is this such a complicated thing to answer?
As well as goals and metrics, and that we have not just as myself as the Center for Health Equity, but really across the entirety of our enterprise. So
goals and metrics, you're talking about quotas?
Whether your communications or your IT, HR is pretty well understood in terms of workforce equity.
Is it? Because I can't say that I understand it these days. I've been told that DEI can't just be an HR concern. But okay.
But all these other functions, if you're overseeing data, you're overseeing medical education, you have to, there was accountability, and all of our business units had to create equity action plans.
And if they didn't?
So you have the larger, strategic plan, and then everyone had to create their own equity action plans.
And if they failed to, the consequences were to be?
With metrics, goals, and all of that.
And quotas, and then?
And are held accountable, through and via our CEO.
How? What? Everyone's held accountable. In what way?
And that's kind of, the structure that we're using right now.
What structure? If that is a structure, okay, I got some popsicle sticks I can use to achieve the same effect. But am I using super glue or Elmer's glue? You tell me. Come on.
I would say in brief.
In brief.
And I think, there's accountability even, for me and towards me, or, from my own team. Because
how? What does your team do to you if you fail? What are they allowed to do?
I don't think you can have accountability without supporting and building a culture that allows for greater transparency.
Transparency. The guy asked you, what does accountability look like in your organization? In the context of your organization, what does accountability look like? Transparency. This this entire portion has been as transparent as a welder's mask. What are you talking about?
But also greater psychological safety within the culture, in order to have the kind of really truth telling that accountability requires.
Buzzword, buzz phrase, buzzword, buzz phrase, buzzword, 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 buzz phrase, buzz phrase, buzzword. Buzzword, buzz phrase, buzzword. Buzzword, buzz phrase, buzz phrase, buzz phrase, buzzword, buzz phrase, buzzword.
And so building that part of the work to me has been the harder part of the work, truthfully. And what does it mean to drive culture that allows for accountability?
Oh my
is
gosh.
what I'm always constantly considering.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay. Again, kudos to Khalil for asking a straightforward, uninsulated or padded question, a direct and very simple question, a question that should take, in at least on the temporal plane I would like to live on, maybe about 2 minutes to answer, right? If someone does not achieve the goals set by the organization to do X, Y, Z, P, D, Q, these are the consequences that can be expected to happen. There is, like, maybe it's a 3 strikes and you're out situation, right? It's like, hey, Joe Schmo executive, you've got 1 year to achieve or to fulfill the strategy we've laid out in these 80 pages. And so they come back to Joe Schmo a year later and says, or 6 months later, and says, okay, we're at the halfway point of the process. Where are you in hitting these goals in the strategy? And Joe Schmo says, well, of the 5, we've gotten 2 done. And they're like, okay, well, that's a little bit behind schedule. So we're going to check in with you in another month and see how you're doing. Okay. And then what? Like, what happens? 2 to 5 minutes at most. We just had a whole block of nothing. I guess I knew this was coming, right? I got my Karnak hat on. Guy asks a straight question. What do we get? Gobbledygook answer. All right. Well, this is the first at bat. There's at least one other person on the panel, I think, 1 or 2 other people. So let's hope we get a better answer with the next one.
Thank you, Dr. Maybank, for.
Really? I mean, I realize you're a moderator and not an interviewer or anything, but I would really put her feet to the fire and say, could you give us the 30-second sales pitch on your accountability process?
Situating us and understanding how accountability works.
No, she did nothing of the kind. You're being far, far, far too generous.
Within the healthcare and your organization. I'd love to hear from Chitra, similarly, but of course from a different sector and organization on what does accountability mean within the context of racial equity in your organization.
All right, so round 1, absolute failure. What accountability is held for that failure? I guess my critique and mocking. All right, next.
Thank you, Angel, and I want to also thank Dr.
Oh, sorry, did I say Khalil earlier? I apologize. Onhill. I don't know why I had Khalil. Onhill, that's his name.
Muhammad and the entire IRA team for the opportunity to be here with this distinguished panel. Mm-hmm. And of course, the other panelists. It's really an honor.
Sure.
So to understand what accountability means in the environmental sector,
yes,
we have to recognize that there's a growing body of research that shows that pollution is not distributed equally.
Pollution is not distributed equally. Boy, oh boy. Boy, do I wish that pollution was distributed equally. What?
That Black and brown people tend to be exposed much more to more than one toxin at a time and much.
Okay, that freeze in the video was part of the source video. That wasn't me. So let's back up a little bit because that kind of threw me off slightly.
That shows that pollution is not distributed equally. That Black and brown people tend to be exposed much more to more than one toxin at a time and much more to them. The exposure gets worse the more racially segregated a community is.
All right, so pollution is racist, okay.
And that exposure to multiple toxins can have a worse health impact than that of an individual toxin.
You don't say. Okay, how do you hold people accountable within your organization for racial equity? Okay.
And the additional burden of other stressors, such as disparities in education and healthcare, can compound the impact of toxic exposure.
Oh, it's kind of like a whole intersectional kind of situation. Different terrible things befalling you can have a compounding effect. Okay. How do you hold people accountable in your organization for racial equity goals?
So activists knew this. People who were studying this, along with the civil rights movement, knew this decades ago.
What? That being exposed to more than one toxin at one time can lead to worse health outcomes? I assume a lot of people knew that for a long time. What?
And convinced the administration at the time to set up an environmental equity office. This was all the way back in 1992, when it was set up at EPA.
1990. So you bring up the Civil Rights Act, Civil Rights Movement of 1960s, and then we jump 30 years ahead to 1992. How does your organization handle accountability for racial equity?
To start to delve into this problem. And then in 1994, President Bill Clinton signed the Executive Order on Environmental Justice. And at that time, they decided to use the term justice instead of equity. And then the Office of Environmental Justice was formed.
Fascinating. How does your organization hold itself accountable for racial equity?
So this was more than 30 years ago.
Yes.
And EPA has had that much time to sort of wrestle with these questions of what does it mean to be accountable.
Right.
Well,
and in those 30 years, you have reached the conclusion that accountability looks like...
It is, and I've been there. I was at EPA for 20 years. I joined the Union of Concerned Scientists just back in May.
Okay. Of this year?
And I'll sort of balance some of my comments. I'll focus my comments on the equity work and the equity action plans that we were asked to put together back at EPA by the Biden-Harris administration.
Why don't you focus on Hill's question? What does accountability look like in your organization in regards to racial equity? Can we do that? Can any one of these experienced professionals answer a direct question? Is that, and again, this is not the first time. This is not my first rodeo in something like this, where you have a moderator ask a should be relatively simple question of career professionals, and somehow we end up in la la land when it comes to the answers. It is so common, it's actually kind of disturbing.
But I will also mention that UCS has gone through its own journey, and maybe we just won't necessarily have time to go through all of that today.
Yeah, please don't.
But that it's, I would do a disservice to UCS by not saying and acknowledging that part of my reason for making the shift is sort of an acknowledgement that this organization too is investing heavily on anti-racism work.
Okay, we're not talking about you, the individual. We're talking about the organization you represent. What does your organization do to hold itself accountable for racial equity work? I'm going to be a broken record here. Okay.
And has set up a Jedi office.
Oh, Jedi! Uh-oh! Oh, the Jedi are returning. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Oh boy, Scientific American. I think your hold on the industry is starting to fall.
Justice, equity, diversity, inclusion office.
Yes.
So going back to the EPA's work.
Yes.
You have to understand what environmental justice means.
No, I actually, I don't. I just need you to describe what are the consequences for failure in your organization when it comes to its racial equity initiatives. That's all I need to know. That's all that was asked of you.
So as EPA defines it, it's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income.
Then why did you specify certain races at the top of this? Everyone, every human being is negatively impacted by pollution in some way, shape, or form. Toxins don't care about your skin color, but you seem to.
And that is the procedural part of the definition. And then it's talking about it in terms of development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And the goal will only be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards.
Except some people need more protecting than others, apparently.
As well as equal access to the decision-making processes. So they're both distributive and procedural justice are attended to in this definition.
And what are the consequences for failure to meet those goals in your organization?
And when the Biden-Harris administration came in, they signed in Executive Order 13985, and that actually required all the agencies to put together an equity action plan.
Great. Okay. Insert broken record here.
What it did back then was require senior leaders to put together teams and actually define what do we mean within the sphere of EPA's mandate. How would we implement this?
You've had 30 years since the environmental justice executive order initiative, whatever the Clinton put into place, has been there. You've had 30 years to figure that out. You should already have an answer to this. You should have already had something already established that effectively fills that executive order. Why are you having to reinvent the wheel? What was the point of that history lesson in all of your past work and focus on these subjects if all of a sudden it sounds like you're starting from scratch as of 2021? Okay.
And they put together the major categories of what EPA does and how they saw equity being able to be advanced. So this would have to, they mentioned things like a comprehensive framework for considering cumulative impacts in EPA decisions, building the capacity of underserved communities to even be able to intervene or provide input into EPA's work. Developing in EPA's internal capacity to engage underserved communities and implement clear and accountable processes.
Do you want to give us one of those accountable processes and the consequences for failure?
To act based on the input of communities, and then strengthen our civil rights compliance program, which we knew was woefully under-resourced until that time, as well as acknowledging that there's a role for communities to be involved in science.
Oh, is there?
And so integrating participatory community science into EPA's research program was another goal, as well as...
Did you achieve that goal? If you didn't, what would have been the consequence for not achieving that goal?
As acknowledging about EPA's procurement and contracting processes, making those equitable. So lots of dimensions that we were trying to work on. And the other thing that it referenced is EPA had a long-term planning process underway. Where justice and equity had never been articulated explicitly.
Clinton established an environmental justice initiative in 1992, up through 1994, you mentioned. Okay. those concepts had never been explicitly. Am I just losing my mind in the course of this? I am listening very, very carefully to what she is saying. And what she is saying is contradicting itself every other paragraph. And none of it seems to be getting close to answering the question that was actually posed. So really the only thing I'm learning at this point is the ability of representatives of these organizations to just filibuster in the face of a direct question. I mean, I guess that's something. I guess I'm learning something.
And for the first time with this administration and Administrator Regan's mandate to the agency, we were required to look at building out measures in the long-term plan, which was going to last for beyond just this administration, to try to embed that work with all of the career staff within EPA.
And nothing that Clinton initiated back in the 90s did any of that. Why did you bring up Clinton's actions regarding environmental justice at all? Because apparently the time between 1992 and 2022 was just, I guess this is a confession that it was effectively wasted, that nothing was done, no action was taken, no development occurred. Like, so what? Every 30 years or so, a Democratic president has to come along and just say the words environmental justice and the clock restarts again, and you wait for the next 30 years to say you're doing something again. Okay.
And I won't go into the details of it.
Oh, no, don't bother. I mean, you've already taken up so much time not answering the question that was asked you. Why go into many more details?
But just to share that there was a lot of paper that was involved.
Well, that's just contributing to the destruction of the planet, you know.
And planning involved in making sure people understood what we meant by accountability.
Could you summarize it for us? Could you take a moment and distill it down to the basics to answer Anhil's question, to answer the core subject of this presentation? What does accountability look like in your organization? Could you take a moment? Could you? Good gravy.
And a lot of invention happening, because this was the first time we were invited to the table to do a lot of this work.
You brought up, and I know you weren't there at the time, but you brought up the environmental justice initiatives pushed forward by Bill Clinton in the early to mid 1990s. And this is the first time in 2021, 2022, the first time that you, the EPA, had ever been invited to do anything about environmental justice. Am I... I just wanted to find out what happens if you fail at your job. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to find out, what does failure and the consequences thereof look like? I have been wondering this for years in different organizations when it comes to DEI, or in this case, anti-racism, justice, equity. I mean, you're bringing it all up at once, so it all has something to do with each other, right? I don't think that, I'm not sure that either one of our first two speakers here have actually brought up the word anti-racism in their presentations. They've talked about equity, they've talked about justice, they've talked about diversity, on and on and on.
Excellent.
No, Anhil, that's not excellent. That's not excellent. For the second time at bat, your question was not answered. And I know you've got to move it along. I can tell you're nervous, but really, she did not answer your question. Neither of your speakers so far have answered the question. Okay, there's at least one other person on this panel. I got about 10 minutes left in this broadcast. Third time's the charm.
And there's definitely plenty to unpack there.
You're right. There is plenty to unpack. Unfortunately,
those dimensions that you mentioned, Chitra. Now let's turn it over to Lorenzo to give us a understanding from the philanthropic side what accountability means in the context of racial equity at your organization.
Okay, and again, I know I'm just lavishing the praise here, but for whatever nervousness or hesitancy he might have for holding his speakers accountable for not answering the question posed, at least he's being consistent. He's asking a straight question. And even if he doesn't try to get them to, more winnow down what they're saying, it's their show. He's giving them the opportunity to give the answer they want to give to the question. And a non-answer may not answer the question, but it does tell us something about either the organization in general or at least the person who's the spokesperson for it. So I'll try to take that as the thinnest of silver linings.
Thank you. Buenos dias. Good morning. Again, my name is Lorenzo Herrera Lozano, and very grateful to be here with you all, and it's really an honor to be on this panel with you all as well. I am zooming in from unceded Ohlone territory, also known as the Mission District in San Francisco. And I work at Justice Funders, and I apologize, I am getting over a cold or something, which I knew the clock would start the minute it was my turn to speak. So,
okay, well, between his cold and his microphone quality is a little muffled, so I'm going to do my best to. I guess I'll have to lean on the subtitles, which are kind of hit or miss depending, but okay.
I'll do my best to hold it in. So Justice Funders, we are a partner and guide for philanthropy to redistribute wealth, democratize power, and shift economic control to communities. And so we work, our work is based on the framework of just transition. And so we're looking at how to support foundations or philanthropy to move away from continuing to invest in the very systems that perpetuate human harm.
Okay, to stop investing in systems that perpetuate human harm. Harm is a mini splendored thing, let's say. So, okay.
And human suffering, and recognizing that foundations are in fact a byproduct or product of the very systems of economic exploitation that have been extracting resources from communities for the last few hundred years.
Okay. I would hope he'd give us an example or two of organizations or industries or something that they would never work for, and then those that they would, so I can have something to compare and contrast with, because, anybody could make an argument that any organization or long-term foundation or whatever else does harm in some way, shape, or form, or isn't doing enough good, if that's the flip side of it, but okay.
And so our vision is that we envision a world that honors the sacredness of our natural resources and recognizes the inalienable rights of all.
Honors our sacred resources and honors the inalienable rights. Okay, sounds good. What are the consequences for failure in your organization when it comes to racial equity goals?
And our vision is, we call it a 100-year vision. And when I think about accountability, I think about the generations who will be on the receiving end of that vision, and hopefully will be on the receiving end of the work that we are doing. And
wait, when you think about accountability, you think about the future generations that are going to be on the receiving end of the work that you're doing 100 years from now. Okay, does that inspire you to put some kind of specific consequences on setting goals and meeting them in your organization?
And so for me, accountability is, what do I need to do to be able to show up every day and as my full and best self?
Accountability is, what do you need to do to show up each day as your full, and I think you said accountable self? I don't know what that means.
And what are the conditions I need to do that, because I am accountable again to them. So what kind of ancestor will I be?
You are accountable to the descendants for which you are working. Okay, so after you and I are long gone, 100 years from now, somebody alive is going to look back and hold you accountable. Nice work if you can get it, I guess.
And recognizing that 100 years is not a long time when it comes to human evolution. So
you're correct. 100 years is not a long time when it comes to human evolution. What?
So the internal resources that they will have will not be that much different than the ones we have today. And so rather than constantly postponing the embodiment of our vision, how do we start doing that today? How do we start envisioning today? So how do we push ourselves in that way? And so that's where the accountability is at. How do we raise the bar?
The accountability is at how do we raise the bar? This is what always fascinates me, you know? I mean, some of these organizations I may have done videos on before, as sort of in a general sense, but the individuals involved, as far as I can tell, and admittedly, I've looked at a lot of people over a long time, a lot of faces, a lot of names. So as far as I know, I have never, ever heard from any of these people before. But you ask them a direct question, and I'm always fascinated to hear the answers, even if they're not answers that actually answer the question, because it gives me some kind of insight into the mindset that is emplaced in these large and sometimes very prestigious organizations that on the outside seem like, oh, they're, you know, there must be experts and they're doing all this stuff and everything else. And then you actually start listening to the people doing the work in the trenches, and it doesn't make any sense. And like, how do you run this organization? How does this work? What happens in the company itself if you're asked a direct question, such as in this case? Explain how this mechanism of your organization works. You know, especially if you're the person in charge of it. It should be a fairly simple answer, right? If someone does not show up for work on time, what is the accountability process for that? What can I expect to happen if I don't show up for work on time? If I work for a company where timeliness and punctuality is key to getting the work done that needs to be done each day, and I do not show up on time, what can I expect to happen? That's called accountability. What is the consequence for failure to meet a specified goal? How am I held accountable? Maybe I get a warning, right? Maybe that's strike one. Right? Without a reasonable explanation or a doctor's note or something else, maybe I get a warning. You know, if I show up late for work and I say there was a pileup on the freeway that backed up traffic for about 17 miles, it's right there on the radio, it outside of my control. Okay, there we go. If I don't have such an explanation, what's the consequence? If it happens a second time, what's the consequence? And if it happens a third time, what's the consequence? That's called being held accountable. Why is that such a difficult thing to describe in short order between three professional experts in their fields and in their management in these organizations? And I'm not just necessarily talking about these three. I'm talking about every other panel discussion I've ever looked at where something similar has taken place.
For one another. And so how we've been doing that at Justice Funders, so the roadmap, No,
we're not talking about roadmaps. No, we haven't gotten to roadmaps yet. No, that's later. Roadmaps is the second subject. Accountability. We're on accountability. Don't jump ahead.
There's a framework that we've been developing called regenerative leadership. And so it's based on the premise that the more we impact the systems that we seek to change, the more we should expect resistance, right? The work should get harder, the more we succeed at really interrupting.
Okay, I I'm lost, and my brain for now is done. 3 different people from 3 different organizations asked the exact same question. So again, credit to Onhill for not changing it up or trying to soften it or anything else. And none of them could answer it. That is my takeaway from this. Even though I haven't finished our current speaker's portion, I have a feeling that by the end of it, nothing in specificity about accountability in his organization will be revealed to us. I could be wrong. It's possible. But at this point in time on a Sunday morning, I don't wish to proceed on rolling those dice. So I'll take a minute here for your guys' comments, and then we will wrap up with some programming notes for this next week, because I got a busy week this next week. Old Guy Gamer, some reason there's a burn. Okay. I think that is out of context. So I will try not to click on things that do not have me tagged in them. Advocast Diabli, I could answer that question, Scribe, but first let me tell you about my chicken soup recipe. My chicken soup recipe. Man, it's Sunday morning, isn't it? Let's see. Lexi Mads, if it'll come up here. Come on, StreamYard. There you go. May God have mercy on all our souls, and I award you no points. Yes, Billy Madison. Billy Madison. Let's see. Scanner Daftly, yes, when you try to infect a system, the body fights back, you Marxist. I don't know what he does yet. I still don't know. And that wasn't the question that was asked of him anyway. So, yeah, we expect this work to get harder. The more that we do this, we more expect pushback. What are you doing? And to whom are you doing it? And in what way? But that wasn't the question that was asked of you. A question of internal process was asked of you, not external action. I want to know how you handle your own shop, how you tend to your own flock, as it were. That's the question that was asked. The question that you all are pointedly not answering. So, let's see. TC Lachance. It is impressive how much of a knot they tied themselves in to make themselves look good. Well, if that was the goal, they failed. And the consequence of failure is my mocking, I suppose, of the whole situation. So that's the only accountability I can provide in this situation. But that, as probably the worst segue ever, this coming Wednesday, I have to hold myself accountable on a chronological scale, because this coming Wednesday, October 11th, starting at noon Pacific time, 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be holding my 7th year anniversary extravaganza. Yes, as of October 11th, it will have been 7 years since I've started doing YouTube. Holy cats. And it promises to be quite the endeavor. Now, I haven't set a time limit on it, because at this point, I don't know how much time I'm going to need, because just on a lark, I sent out a kind of a simple, friendly form letter to most of my YouTube friends and or acquaintances that I've made over the years, just on the chance that, hey, I'm doing this thing next Wednesday. If you can pop in for a minute, or if you want to hang out for a little bit, that'd be cool, but no big deal, whatever. Well, so far I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and counting individuals of great fame and aplomb in my little world, who have agreed to at least consider, at the worst, popping in to say hello and or hang out, depending on what's going on. Now, what will be going on this extravaganza? Well, I can promise you there will be more than one TEDx gone over. I've saved back a few for a rainy day over time, and I am prepared to go over them either solo or with 1 or 2 guests, depending on what happens on that day. As well, there is the possibility that Satsu 2 Cents and I will be going over some videos of his selection on that same occasion. And I do also promise some Mad Libs, because Mad Libs. And who knows what else might come up in the course of things, what conversations might start with my old friends, what reminiscences, what jokes, what other controversies will arise. We shall see. I don't know. You'll find out when I do, Wednesday, October 11th, noon Pacific, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, and whatever time zone that is elsewhere in the world. So I hope to see you then for that. So that's the big one. Later today, there's at least 2 other instances that I'll be showing up on the intertubes. The first one, later tonight, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, will be the next installment of my series Book Review of the Vampire, where my friend Leonore and I will continue with The Vampire Lestat, the second book in the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles. We are closing in on the end of the book as we finish up the penultimate section, Ancient Magic, Ancient Mysteries. So getting to that one. And then shortly thereafter from that broadcast at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, over on the Midnight's Edge After Dark channel, I will be appearing, granted something else happens, on there with Tom Connors and Nick Weiser and who else is going to be on there? Clobberin' Time and Toxic Man Flu and Sagacious Six and a bunch of other people who I'm probably forgetting right now, and I apologize for that, as we go over the continuing list of top Halloween films of 2023, or the top films to watch for Halloween for 2023. It started off at 85. I guess they added 2 more in the intervening week, and each of us also have our own top 5 lists of various sorts, so we'll be doing that as well. So that's what's coming up. I'm going to end this here because my brain is done and my voice is fading out. If I missed any comments in the chat that you'd like to be known to the world, otherwise, please leave them in comments after this. Also, on the way out, if you'd leave a like, I'd appreciate it. And per tradition, I also forgot to mention at the top of the chat box, there's some fundraisers up there for our friends Maddie, Lisa, and Angry Illinoisian. Each of them in their own way have currently experienced some kind of medical emergency of one sort or another. Maddie is dealing with a cancer diagnosis and needs some help with deductibles. Lisa and her boyfriend are trying to pay for their dog's surgery. And then Angry Illinoisian is dealing with a work injury that's got him on workers' comp. Either way, if you take a look at those, if you can donate, please do so. If you can't, that's fine. But if you can share those out on social media, please do that as well. Also, if you missed it, because I might as well get it all out here, it's a clearinghouse of different pieces of information. If you missed it, I did a new episode of Living on Borrowed Crime the other day, featuring Music City 911, a podcast that's been around for a while, but a guy that just recently started a YouTube channel. And that was a very interesting conversation between me, Music City 911, and my co-pilot for the show, Just Interrogations, a friend of mine from a previous interview that you may have seen on the series. But if you didn't, check out the series Living on Borrowed Crime on my channel. And before I totally forget, and before I really end the stream, I have a Discord server. If you're not a member of the Discord server, I've just put a link into the chat. If you'd like to join the Discord, click on the link. You'll find yourself on the Say Hello landing channel, and there, all you have to do is say hello. In addition, you have to give away the secret word. The secret word tells me and my moderators that you actually watch the show and thus have earned the right to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is accountability. I know, low-hanging fruit, but I'll take it because I'm lazy. Accountability. Just say hello, accountability, and you will be a member of the Discord server. With that, everyone, I'm going to call it here. Thank you so much for joining me today on this beautiful Sunday morning. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the fundraisers at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. It is very much appreciated. Everyone, have a good rest of your Sunday and weekend. Have a good week ahead of you. I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.